What initially drew you to the Power Platform? Did the Power Platform choose you, or did you choose the Power Platform?
We had massive amounts of data available to us. We just needed access to it. I'll say that I came into this from Excel and Access and SharePoint.
Talk about how you go from, hey guys, there's a problem here, to becoming a data expert where you are with the Power Platform.
So it was just like, what? One of the things that I was required to do.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of PowerTalks. My name is Griffin, the host of the Citizen Developer channel, and today I am joined by special guest Cat Schneider. Now, Cat is a senior software engineer at Hitachi Solutions America with a fascinating career journey that spans nearly 15 years in public service and a dynamic transition into the tech world. Cat began her career as a compliance and enforcement inspector with the state of Florida, eventually becoming a statewide coordinator and data expert. Now, with an introduction into Power BI and Power Platform, she led innovative projects and fostered a thriving community. As a business apps MVP and Power Platform community super user, she's dedicated to empowering citizen developers and advancing data solutions. Kat, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you. Happy to be here.
That's awesome. I'm glad you're here. I do just got to say, your office or your setup there looks pretty cozy. You got the LED lights and everything going. And
yeah, I don't know if you can quite see it, but I also got my MVP award over there too.
There we go. All right, little flex, little slight, slight flex. I got you.
I'm super excited because I actually got my renewal disc yesterday. Like this was an eventful renewal. So but let's just say that it was like, oh my god, the discs have made it.
That is so funny. Well, congrats there. I know that that's always nerve-wracking for most MVPs, and that's awesome. I'm glad to have you on the show. I kind of wanted to start the conversation. We don't necessarily, I know you're a storyteller, happy for you to tell whatever the story is here, but you have a background in public service before kind of transitioning or adding in this Power Platform, Power BI role when you were there and, transitioning into the tech industry. I kind of wanted to ask you, what initially drew you to the Power Platform? I mean, did the Power Platform choose you, or did you choose the Power Platform?
It was definitely, it chose me type situation. I'll say that I came into this from Excel and Access and SharePoint. Excel's probably my first tech love. It's something that I've always just been like proficient with, especially when I was working at the state, because, went immediately from school into a state job and then doing inspections. And, it was one of these things where it's like, okay, well, how do we make a consistent form that can be filled in that, how do we get the data and make it so that all of our inspections are quickly, checked and verified? And so it was one of these things where, like, I just kind of naturally fell into that role because being ADHD, curious about literally everything, and let's find a new hobby, and I will work at something until it's no longer workable. So I got really, really good with Excel. And it was to the point that I was building Power Apps in Excel before Power Apps was a thing. And so, being able to integrate data systems directly into my Excel and using macros and, we had massive amounts of data available to us. We just needed access to it. And when I found out about that, I was like, why are we typing this information out? Like, it's already in the system. Why don't we just use that information and spend our time more wisely, like, actually filling in the detail about this inspection? So, like, I knew nothing about, like, data systems other than I had to use MATLAB and R while I was in school for biology. And it was for one class, and as soon as I learned it, I forgot it. So, like, the introduction to SQL, and then, like, figuring out, normalized data systems, and oh, hey, you can just use this and combine them like this, and oh, if you don't do the right combination, you're going to end up with double the information, and just all of these different things about data. And I was fascinated by it. It got to the point, I think, right before I left FDEP, I was looking at our GIS layers and the data that we were putting out in our GIS layers. And I'm like, wait a second. These are put together not great. Like,
respectfully,
there were 13, I think, different tables in the single query that was being used to populate our GIS layer for our compliance and enforcement data. And they were like, they had them put together in odd ways to the point that the information that was coming through wasn't actually 100% accurate. It was as accurate as it could be made by somebody who didn't really understand the data. And so I started working with the GIS team to try and actually fix that, like, setup. And so, yeah, it was pretty awesome, like, getting to do that. And then I went over to FDOT thinking, FDEP's got a lot of data. I'm not really sure what FDOT does, but hey, here's this job. I can go work on employee survey stuff. That seems easy enough. And then I quickly found out how much data FDOT is generating on a minute-by-minute basis. And I was like, yeah, no, FDEP doesn't have anything on these guys. Like, holy God.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, no, it was that introduction to data and how data works and moves, and trying to get all of that to work at FDEP, and then moving into FDOT and just taking it that extra mile, and then having the mentoring while I was at FDOT in order to, like, see different perspectives and how data gets used in an organization, or how, an organization has oversight of their data. Like,
yeah.
So I talked about this a little bit with you before in, like, my write-up, but I was mentored by the CIO for a while there while I was at FDOT, and there were so many things that I was just like, but this doesn't make sense, or why are we doing it like this, or like, what's happening? And so there was actually, there was an incident where the state servers had corrupted or something like that, and he'd said to me, he's like, the failovers failed to fail over, and I was like, what does that even mean?
I don't know what that means,
And so, like, he explained it to me. So it's like, I'm a consummate learner. Mm-hmm. Like, I literally want to know why. Like, why this, or why, like, always trying to figure out what's going on and why things are the way that they are, or what makes things tick, or people tick, or whatever. Like, there's these spinning wheels and they've been put into motion, but why are they going in that direction? And so, like, I'm a burden for some people, because they're like, why are you asking me all these questions? And I'm like, but none of it makes sense. Mm-hmm. Make it make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So you were spitting out some alphabet soup, but FDOT, you transitioned to FDOT, and you're like, oh my goodness, the data here is insane. The amount of data, like you said, minute by minute. And so then I'm guessing that then when you were at FDOT, you were kind of introduced into utilizing Power BI, and then ultimately the Power Platform. Like, I know, I don't want to get in front of the conversation here, but I know, at some point you led this Power Platform community and everything. I mean, talk about that and how you go from, hey guys, there's a problem here, to becoming a data expert right where you are with the Power Platform.
Yeah, so when I went from FDEP, and yes, state government is a haven for acronyms. Like, while I was at both agencies, we were trying to figure out how much of a sentence we could make using only acronyms, and seeing how many people could actually still understand what we were saying.
Yeah.
But while I was at FDOT, I was hired on to be the statewide employee survey administrator, which was basically this survey that had been done at FDOT for 20 some odd years to basically track, employee engagement, satisfaction, retention, all of that. And so the survey had been done essentially the same way for 20 years. And I got hired on to help transition from this old rickety setup that they had a custom design that was built, and the design was no longer going to work once we moved into Edge and we got rid of Internet Explorer, and they were just like, we need to have something more modern that's more flexible. So I was like, cool, I can help, let's do this. Got into that, and then it was, okay, now we need to create these reports. And I was like, oh, cool, no big deal, I can do these reports, except, oh yeah, you have to do 502 of these reports. They all need to be output in Excel and PDF. And oh yeah, if anything is wrong with these reports because you didn't have any kind of guidance or understanding about the way the reports had been put together, so it was based on best professional judgment, yeah, you have to update every single one of those 502 reports individually, and you can, kiss your computer goodbye for the next 6 hours. So it was like I automated as much as I could via code, but the amount of information that had to be translated into each of these files and then output as an Excel and a PDF, every time I found out that, oh, this wasn't there, that wasn't there, I wanted to cry because I could not get anything done. So, I ended up getting paired up with the CIO through the mentoring program at FDOT. And the very first conversation that we had, where we're just getting, introduced to each other and trying to figure out where is this mentoring relationship going to go? What's going to become of it? He was asking me things that I was interested in working on, whatnot. And I was like, well, I was just watching a Power BI video on LinkedIn Learning, trying to figure out is this something that could help us, especially from the perspective of this employee survey? Because, dear God, I don't want to go through that process ever again. And so he's like, well, actually, I have one extra license for Power BI, available if you're interested. And I was like, yes, please. How do we make this happen? And so, the first month that we were paired up, I think we were meeting, every other day-ish for 30 minutes. And I was basically just picking his brain about, how data works in this different space, because it's no longer just this simplistic, here's all of your data and goodbye. Now it's your data now can talk to your data, and it can start to mold to the things that you're asking of it. And it was just it was a very different concept for me to try and understand that, wrap my head around. But after spending a month working on it, I showed him this mock-up of an employee survey report of the same data that I just put out. And I was like, but it's no longer a one-dimensional data analysis report anymore, because I can come over here to this one question, the question that has been the lowest scoring question for the past 20 years, to these 634 individuals who strongly disagreed with, I feel that my pay is equivalent to the work that I do. I mean, how many people feel like they're just not being paid for what they're doing? There's a lot of people,
Sure.
especially at the state.
Yeah.
And so I think we had somewhere around 4,000 individual responses on that survey. 634 of them strongly disagreed with that statement. And I was like, now look, if I click on these 634, I can now see every single section of this report and how they responded to leadership questions to training questions to do I have all of the appropriate materials or equipment that I need to do my job, to even training opportunities, or like, and you could just start to see how all of this information was intertwined. Just because somebody said they strongly disagreed with that question doesn't mean that they didn't feel that they were getting help in other areas. Or maybe it was a combination of not getting support from leadership and not having the right training to do the job, or like it was a combination. It's like, we can't give you guys more money necessarily, like that's a whole legislative process, but maybe we can help with that feeling that overall, like, you're just not getting what you're putting into this, by helping in other areas that we do have funding for, that maybe we're not applying it appropriately. So it was just like, what? After a month, and he's like, can you please present this to the statewide meeting like next month? And I was like, as long as nobody considers that I'm an expert in this, like, I just want to be very clear that I'm no expert, that I'm literally just playing around with the data, trying to see what I can come up with, what I can get out of it. And he's like, that's fine. It's 100% acceptable. Like, nobody is going to believe that you are the expert. And I was like, okay, just as long as we're clear about that, yeah. I'm fine.
So, here, real quick. So, did you have you obviously had some experience with managing data, but did you have like experience working with Power BI before this opportunity, or was it like, hey, I've kind of got Power BI, want to maybe see if you can figure something out, and you did with trial and error?
No, it was
Google's.
Like, that was the very first introduction to large data set manipulation and reporting. Like, I had access to large amounts of data. I mean, one of the things that I was required to do at FDEP annually was review all of the data that we had pushed to EPA's data systems. So, of course, I probably should, acronym, like, define. So, FDEP, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, EPA, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The program that I was working for was a federally mandated program. We had to push all of our data to EPA's data systems. And so all of our compliance and enforcement data, all of our permitting data, all of our, reporting data, like anything and everything related to these programs, these federally mandated programs, all had to go to the federal data systems. And so, every time we would do a new report, we would do a new permit, whatever, that information got pushed to their systems. Anytime we did an inspection, that got pushed to the systems. And then there was a 3-month period at the beginning of the year where we had to review everything that we pushed in the last year. And so then it was like, how are we going to review millions of lines of data? Mm-hmm. And so I had to come up with a process that way. And I ended up making an Excel, of course, with macros that I just had a single button that I would push, and then I would walk away from my computer for an hour, and it would go and it would open up Internet Explorer. It would go to the EPA website. It would put all my credentials in. It would open up to the individual pages that it had to go to. It would find the buttons that it had to find to export all the information as CSVs, import all of that information into the Excel, and then it would check to see what the information was the week before for all this data. And then I would come back to my computer and I would see, okay, this is all the stuff that we have to check this week. And every Monday I had to do this, millions of lines of data. And it was just absolute insanity. So, yeah. But that again, push of a single button and all of that was happening.
Yeah.
So automation has been a thing for me for a while.
If you are thinking to yourself that you want to get into low-code development or learn about the Power Platform, then I want to personally invite you to sign up for this completely free self-paced course that is going to cover everything you need to know to begin low-code development today. Not too long ago, I was a complete beginner and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what the Power Platform was. But in just 2 years, I have gone from being an associate to a senior level consultant, and I can truly say that I love what I do. The content in this course is handpicked by me so you can understand the basics of the Power Platform and ultimately be prepared to take the PL 900 certification if that's something you're interested in. If you are interested, be sure to follow the first link in the description down below, and do not forget to use the promo code YouTube at checkout in order to get the course for completely free. This is going to give you immediate access to the entire course so that you can start to change your future today. Now, let's get back to the conversation. All right, taking us back, you showcased what you had done in Power BI to your CIO and other people.
Yeah.
And he was like, all right, Kat, this is world changing. You're the expert. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right.
You know, we need you to showcase this to the head honchos, right? I'm assuming by the fact that you still work in data and technology that you crushed it, you know?
Yeah.
And they loved what you had came up with. And at some point, you started working with more than just Power BI, right? And I'd love to get into, you know, you created this Power Platform community of practice, I believe you called it,
That's
at the
what transitions do.
Yeah, right? And so this was a group of other people that, I don't know if it'd be wise to say you were training, but you were all learning about the Power Platform and how to implement it and use it with where you guys were working. I mean, yeah. Share a little bit about this group, how maybe it kind of began, and what were some of the key challenges maybe and successes of this group that you think you learned?
Yeah, so, you know, that statewide OIT meeting with everybody, 30-minute slot, say, hey guys, everybody's familiar with the employee survey data. Y'all have been looking at it for 20 years. Y'all have seen the reports. Y'all know that this data is very one-dimensional in these reports. Now, let's take a consideration at Power BI. And then I showed them, you know, hey, look at all of the things you can do. You can point and click and things will change. And now all of your information went from being one-dimensional, not even knowing how any of it was related, to we're playing 3D chess now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that pretty much blew everybody's minds. You know, we'd been using Tableau. We were a Tableau agency forever. And so this whole looking into Power BI was to see, could we transition from Tableau into Power BI? Is Power BI going to bring us anything new or different? And so gave that presentation. Everybody loved it. And then about 2 months later, like that time period, the Office of Information Technology, they got together and they decided, okay, we want to go ahead and we want to implement this. We've got enough people here who know enough about data that they can do these data manipulations. Let's look at building up a community to learn and grow and understand this product. So I think it started out as like 10 of us in October to like, it was just, hey, here's what our goals are, overall vision for this community of practice. And it was headed up by the Office of Information Technology. They were the leaders of it, but they were not the drivers of it. The drivers were those in the business units that were using this and they were trying to understand it. And OIT was essentially the governance and guardrails for what can and can't we do with this information. And so just the 10 of us, and then we decided we were going to do these monthly meetings, and you know, it would just be a quick, hey guys, this is the community of practice, these are what, you know, our goals and our vision for this is. Here's some presentations from other business users within the organization about what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so I would participate in several of those and show, oh, hey, look at this nifty thing that I did. Or, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with any of the other community calls that are, you know, put on by Microsoft every month or every week, as it were. But it was essentially like, hey, just come and show us what you're doing. Talk about this thing that you found, or what is, sparked your interest or curiosity, and like let's talk through it and see, what could be done, or how things could be, identified or transitioned or whatever. And so just the 10 of us, and then, the next month we had several more of us, joining the call, and the next month so on and so forth, to the point that by the time I left FDOT, we had grown to, I think, over 300 active users in this community of practice that were we had a Teams channel or a Teams group, and several channels within that were dedicated to, SharePoint, to data systems, to, Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps, you name it, Power Platform, and data. Like, there was a team dedicated to it was essentially internal Stack Overflow, if you will. So you have a question, you post it out in the channel, and somebody will answer it. And that's how, we got to helping each other out to understand this. And it was nice because while you weren't, like, you could ask your question, you didn't have to worry about a worldwide group trying to completely generalize your question to understand it. Like, these people are closer to the actual problem, and they can tend to understand what exactly it is that you're trying to do without maybe necessarily needing to understand the entire process. And so it was nice that we could build that community, and that community was an organic grassroots type growth. It's not top down growth, it's bottom up growth. And so it worked out better that way, because, just let it grow organically. As a farmer or, a gardener or whatever, if you let it grow wild, it'll go wild. But if, you go out there and you do your thing and, maintain it, you can have a growing, thriving garden. And that's essentially what we did at FDOT. And yeah, like,
very cool.
Yeah, I actually had transitioned into Power Apps and Power Automate shortly after that presentation to statewide OIT, but before the community of practice. And so community practice kicked off, and I was like, ADHD says I really want to keep going down this track.
Yeah.
But also ADHD says I really want to talk to people about this and get them excited. And
yeah.
That was actually part of some of the driving force, I think, for like that community growing too, is people like myself who are really excited about the products and what they can do and how they can like just drastically transform our daily jobs.
Yeah.
Like, they were the drivers for building this community. So
yeah, I think that's awesome. I was going to ask you too, so in just your story and everything you've shared, you advocate for having fun with tools and learning through playing around with it. I mean, how do you incorporate this mindset into, I mean, and you've kind of already shared some stories, right? But how do you continue to incorporate this mindset into your work now, and how can others do the same?
So, I don't know about you, but I grew up in the 80s and 90s as a Toys R Us kid. So much so as a Toys R Us kid that I actually went to work for Toys R Us, and I worked for them for 5 years. So this whole idea of, play is just, it's ingrained into me. And as a child of the 80s, I mean,
Super Mario. There we go. I love it.
I love it. Oh, yeah. Up here too. But so like, good. It's all about play for me. Like, you want somebody to learn something, make it playful. Make it, a great storyline. Give them something to just take on and, feel like they're a part of without forcing it on them. Like, make them want it. So if you can tell it with a great story, or, if it's something that you want to do, you're gonna want, like, I don't know about you, but I don't want to do, financial reports all day, every day, and, like, ew, that doesn't sound fun.
Yeah.
But, like, if I'm like, oh, hey, I need to get a budget for, my house, and I need a way to be able to track what I'm doing. Hey, I can go in here and I can build this Power App, and this Power App will let me, just start to put things here and there, and then I can push them to a data system. And hey, I can get Power BI, and I can use Power BI to pull that information down out of the data system, and I can start to manipulate, and I can make colors and pretty. And so, like, finding something that you want to do helps. But then if you can find a way to make it playful or just exciting, or just, if somebody were to look at it from the outside, they're like, why are you doing this? It doesn't have to make sense to them. As long as you're having fun with it, you're learning. And when you're learning, you're growing. And when you're growing, you get better. And then people eventually will call you a wizard because you learn all of these things.
Yeah, right.
It's just, for me, like, learning Power Apps. I should tell you a quick story. If we go back,
go ahead.
All the way back to FDOT or FDEP.
Oh my goodness, we're
I
back
know,
there now. I'm just
all
kidding.
the way back there. I created an access database app, if you will, that went out, and it could connect to Google Maps, and like, we've got the data, like GIS data, lat longs, we've got addresses, we have all this information about these individual organizations that are permitted through us. The group that I was in, we used SIC codes, or Standard Industrial Classification codes, as well as its NAICS codes, which is through the Census Bureau, I believe. It's more sophisticated SIC codes. And so based on what SIC code industry fell under, was, what permitting requirements they had from us. And so there are 29 individual sectors of this permit that we had to keep track of. It was a generic permit. So somebody would say, hey, we're applying for this permit. This is our standard industrial classification codes. And then that would align with specific permit requirements in the generic permit. And so that's a lot to keep track of when you have, it was like some 6,000 or 7,000 individual organizations that were permitted. We had a call center. These organizations would call into our call center, and they would start to ask questions. Well, somebody who's just, typing into the computer on a daily basis, they don't have time to try and understand the, nuances of the permit, if you will. So I built this access database interface, if you will. So our notices center folks, they could just go in there and they could say, okay, this is the permit. Here's all the relevant information. If I need any additional information, here's some links. It'll take me out to the web. I can go see Google Maps exactly where, outfalls and the location of the facilities, all that. And I had this one problem where I was trying to access our electronic document management system information. And, I'd been working with the development team on another project. And I asked one of the developers, can you please come look at this? I am trying to figure this thing out. Walked him through this whole thing. And then he was like sitting there with his jaw just on the table going, you built this? And I was like, yeah, I built this. He's like, why are you here? Why are you not in Silicon Valley? What are you doing with your life? What is going on? And I was like, that's a question for another day. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, right.
And so it was one of these things. It's like, I've kind of always built things for people, because I don't want people to sit on the same struggle bus that I do. I'm fine riding the struggle bus. I've ridden the struggle bus my entire life. If you don't have to have the bus pass to ride the struggle bus, I would rather ride it for you, and you get things done, and you're helping other people. Sure. If I can help you help other people, like, I'd rather do that than have, all of these people just struggle the same struggle when they don't need to unnecessarily. Yeah. But no, that's no fun for me. So anyway, I was trying to figure out a different problem. Excel was being a giant pain in the what, and I was just like, it got to the point that I actually went out onto the internet, found the 2016 ECMA standards, which is essentially this worldwide organization that had made a decision on this is how spreadsheets or Word documents or presentations, the minimum requirements to be considered these types of documents. And I printed out these 1,600 page standards on spreadsheets so that I could try and identify how I can break this problem down to get to what I needed to figure out why it wasn't working for me as I was like trying to figure it out. Like, I showed this to my developer friend and he was just like, there's a word for this.
Yeah.
Why don't you like yourself? And I was like,
yeah,
I do like myself. I promise, I do like myself. But all that to say, when I got into Power Apps, it was to build basically a praise type application. I don't know if you've seen praise in Teams, where it's like you can send this, hey, so-and-so did a great job. Thank you so much for your help. We ended up calling it shout-outs, and it's the same community template that's out there on the Power Apps pages. Like, it's shout-outs, but I took it further and made it so that it was, themed for our organization, that, we had specific requirements that we wanted and we were able to implement, and trying to figure out how I could take this application and make it something that we could use in our organization. I had to figure out what Power Apps was, how it worked. And so I literally took that thing down, opened it up in our environment, sat in front of my computer for almost 18 hours straight, in the dark, hood up, Patrick style. Like, my husband working shift work, he came out and I'm like, seriously, like this in front of the computer, just, I'm gonna figure this out, trying to figure out how Power Apps was working. Like, that, the transition from from VBA, and I could literally make any code or any variable or like anything. I could declare what it was and that's what it was. To the way that Power Apps was working, and like, I had to access the information in a different manner. So it was a weird transition for me, but when I finally figured it out, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing on the planet. Like, this is fantastic. Why haven't we had this before? This is now on the internet. I can now access internet data sources, and I can start to transition and move and play. So, like, once I got that figured out, then it was like on. It's on like Donkey Kong, if you will.
Yeah. For sure.
And so, like, for myself, I have a developer account, one of the free developer accounts from Microsoft that they had available. I don't know if they're ever going to get back to that. Seems like they cut that off a while ago, but I've had this developer account, and I've got so many apps in there where I tried to build Sudoku, or I tried to build a Solitaire, or, just some simple game to understand a concept. Like Sudoku, understanding sequences and the way that you could use specific power effects formulas, understanding collections, understanding galleries. Like, there's so much that you can start to understand when you're like, okay, I know that this is the basis for this. How do I go about, like, making this happen? Like, just working at it until I can get the result. So I very much will continue to work at a problem until I've got it figured out.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to share this.
Okay. What do we got here?
This arrived in the mail, like an Amazon package.
Okay.
I was just like, well, I didn't order anything from Amazon. I know I get Amazonnesia, but like,
yeah.
I don't remember ordering anything. I opened it up and I'm like, it's this wizard hat, and there's this thank you note in there from my friend. She was like, thank you so much for your help with the Excel problem that I was having. And like,
you're a wizard. That's
yeah, That's where my Twitter handle came from, is because everybody, like, every time I would help somebody with Excel, or I would help them with some access problem or SharePoint or whatever, they're like, you're literally a wizard. I never would have figured this out. And I was like, you have no idea how many times I've come at the same problem from different directions. Like, that's why I can do this. I have spent the hours getting to understand this in this manner. Like, it's completely fine. I promise you, it's not that big of a deal. But
Yeah.
you know, it's these things where it's like something so insignificant or small to myself, it can be so incredibly, like, life-changing for somebody else. Like, I actually had that experience yesterday with elastic tables in Dataverse.
Okay.
Like, had my mind, like, the whole top of my head just completely blown off. I was like, are you kidding me? This literally changes the way that I would do anything in Dataverse from this point forward. Like, again, back at FDEP, when I was working with all of our developers and whatnot, I found out about NoSQL. And I was like, what do you mean NoSQL? Everything's SQL. Must be SQL. Why would you not have SQL? That doesn't make sense to me. Like, you want data and you want it to be related? Huh? And so, like, that concept, like, I was aware of it, but it still kind of went straight over my head. And then I found out about JSON. And that seems to, I got the, from their community leaders in Microsoft, David Warner and Hugo Bernier. They have unofficially or officially declared me the JSON whisperer. Because I've talked about JSON several times on the Power Platform community calls, and trying to explain, like, what it is and why you shouldn't be afraid of a bunch of symbols all over the place. Like, it's not as scary as XML or HTML or all of that, but, like, it's still kind of scary. You're looking at several curly braces and square braces, and, you know, there's like double quotes and single quotes and numbers, and sometimes there's no, like, it's a lot of information, and it's all over the place, and sometimes it's not the same. So when I found out about JSON, and, like, I started sharing that out with people, and then I realized, well, you know, I could make something that worked so much better if I could just store this JSON in this field and then parse it out in Power Apps or parse it out in Power Automate. And then, you know, I don't have to have all of these extra columns storing no data when I could just have it all just, like, in a JSON string. And that's what elastic tables are. It's literally just all that information stored in a JSON string, so you don't need all of the extra. And that's where the NoSQL comes in, because your JSON strings don't have to be the exact same between records. So you don't have to have all the same columns. And it was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is what elastic tables are. Oh my God. So, like, me having that experience, it doesn't happen that often, but when it does, like, it makes me understand, like, why people call me a wizard.
Yeah. No, I get what you mean.
It's crazy.
I think it is crazy, and I have a kind of a related question, but it's also a little bit of a transition, you know. And I want to be respectful of your time as well. So you have some form of a background in art as well.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if we have time for, I love that you're a storyteller. I don't know if we have time for another full story here. No shade at all, I promise. But I feel like it's more and more common for people that we work with or people in the space that do not have a computer science background. And whether it's art or myself, I was in business, or people that are in, you know, history or whatever. I mean, why do you feel that your background in art has influenced or positively influenced your approach to data, developing solutions, software development, etc.?
So I think it's a combination of things. Like, growing up, my dad was a mechanical engineer, if you will, a non-officially trained mechanical engineer working on, you know, innovative technologies. He was doing fuel cell technology where, you know, you could use water to power a vehicle. a race car, a submarine. I think we, like, there were so many things like he was working on. So I had that technical side that I got from him. But my mother was a seamstress, and she did alterations for people in Palm Beaches. like she like I was with her more than I was with my dad, because she owned her own business. And so, summer vacations, days off from school, we were just in her shop, if you will. And so I constantly was introduced to the art side of things, and making and crafting and all of that from her. So I had the best of both worlds. And so that just kind of naturally transitioned with me through life. And after I had my daughter, it was one of these things where I was like, I was starting to lose that artistic side of myself. Like, I could feel that being lost to the daily job, the taking care of my kid, to running the household. Like, there was just nowhere for art and crafting and trying to, essentially, if you will, problem solve. And so one of the options that I had available to me as an employee of the state was I could take up to 6 credit hours a semester at a university, which allowed me to also take art classes, because I was like, I need a forced creative outlet. Let me go take art. Oh, by the way, you can't take elective classes, or those that are not considered to be essentially in STEM, unless they are specifically required for your degree. I was like, sweet, I'm going to go get a studio art degree, which requires that I take these courses and do all of these art things. So I spent, I think, 5 years doing 6 credits a semester, fall, spring, and summer. And I went back to school where I got to use my science background to learn ceramics, to, do the chemistry and all of that jazz. So all of that to say, art actually helped me rediscover the problem solving, but it also helped me to understand this idea of abstraction. So taking a concept in making, like, abstracting it to a degree so that at its base elements you can then pivot to the other idea, something else that makes sense to somebody else. So having that art background, it helped me to basically communicate with people better. So like, I think I had to explain why we had to transition from SharePoint Classic sites to SharePoint Modern, to, like, my manager and our cost center manager and our director for administration. Like, I had to explain why we couldn't use SharePoint Classic anymore. We needed to do Modern, and why we needed to, and they were like, but none of this makes any sense. I was like, okay, hold on. Let's consider, like, a SharePoint site is not just the home page and all of the individual pages. Like, the SharePoint site is not a web page. That's not a share. So I had to break down what SharePoint was into terms that they could understand, because they're not data people. They're not, like, technology people. They're, hey, this is the business thing that we need to do. This is what we're doing. And so I had to explain, and basically I broke it down into analogy of beach bag. Like, we go to the beach all the time. Okay, you have a beach bag. Your beach bag is your SharePoint site. Inside your beach bag, you have a cooler. Maybe that's a document library. You have a bucket.
Sunscreen, a bucket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a bucket and a shovel. Hey, that's your list. You've got, like, I started to break these concepts down for them into terms they could understand. And so then that started to help them understand the way that we were transitioning our classic to our modern. And so being able to understand what this concept is, abstract it all the way back to its base elements, and then apply a different perspective to it, that's where I think art has helped me.
Cool.
So.
No, that's awesome. I think that's so sweet. And I can agree that sometimes this concept of meeting customers, like meeting customer pain points, developing solutions, thinking creatively, critical thinking, problem solving, like, while I would say it is learnable,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely, there definitely can be a science to it, that a lot of it is, like, it's art in a way, like, you
Yeah.
have to be able to, like, feel it and come up with the solution, and think creatively, and
Yeah, it's a matter of how much do you want to make your client or your customer come to you versus how much you're willing to go to your client or your customer to get the understanding that's needed.
mm,
Like it's it's a it's basically it's empathy. How much empathy do you have and how much work are you willing to put into it to ensure that there's a happy, outcome. Like
man, yeah,
it really does boil down to empathy and having empathy for others. You might not have ever been in their shoes or ever understand what it is that they do, but get as close to the point of their understanding as you can go. And if they're willing to meet you in the middle somewhere, like, you're going to have better outcomes. But if you stay standing all the way back here and you're like, this is how things are done and this is the way that it's going to happen, and your client's all the way over here, like, you could be
yeah,
standing on a chasm. Like, you don't want to start yelling to be heard or
yeah.
understood. Like, build a bridge and come together so that, like, things can work out. So, yeah.
Dang. I think you just took the conversation and wrapped it in, like, some beautiful wrapping paper and tied a bow right on top with what you just said there. So I think that was awesome. I think it's been awesome getting to talk to you. I'd love to transition us to the after hours, happy
Oh,
hours,
yeah.
but as much time as you have, I know we're all getting, we're meeting in the morning, so it's just before the work day, so people are trying to get at us. But
Yeah.
um, I kind of wanted to ask you, this is a segment, right? Talk about anything, hobbies outside of work and whatever. And you've mentioned a couple times, you sometimes can be all over the place, and your hobbies change week to week. I am also somebody who gets, like, super passionate about something, and I
Mm-hmm.
start it, and then about halfway or 3/4 of the way through it, I no longer am passionate about it, and I get
Yep.
passionate about something else, and never finish what I'm doing.
Been
You,
there,
you,
done that, got the t-shirt.
yeah, right. You had told me that you have been learning to integrate code with electronics. Now, part of me is like, all right, this sounds like more work. This doesn't sound like a hobby. But, I'm happy to listen to this hobby
Yeah.
that or was this last week's hobby? Is this still your
No, no,
hobby
no.
right now?
This is for real hobby. Like,
Okay,
I've
okay.
got all of the stuff here, like,
What's something
right next
you've
to
been
me.
building or working on? Yeah.
Actually, so this is, I'll show you. This is from this company, Inventor.io. This is the, what is it, Adventure Kit Day Zero AI Apocalypse Kit,
Okay.
and it's just filled with, like, goodies. Like,
Okay. Okay.
we got LEDs and resistors. We've got breadboards. We've got, all of the like, it's like this whole thing. So I talked earlier about storytelling and how storytelling is, like, very key and important part of who I am, and how, like, I feel like people can learn. This organization, they do this. I purchased their 30 Days Lost in Space kit from them about a year and a half ago. And it basically, it's, hey, 30 days, let's learn, C# coding. Let's learn how to use, like, what is it? Arduino boards, and learn how to use, what is it? Raspberry Pis, and all of these different electronics concepts. because there's a story that you're out in space, you're this explorer, and your ship has crash landed. Now you need to, get your ship back in working order so that you can meet up with your team. And here's the things that you can do in order to survive the next 30 days to get back to your team. And so it's like this whole storyline, but at the same time, it's helping you understand like these various concepts. And so I had started it because I have this thought in my head that I am eventually going to figure out how to make my manual kiln, which I don't know if you understand what a kiln is, but in ceramics, that's how you make your ceramics. You go up to really high temperatures, like 2,000 plus degrees Fahrenheit, and it's a whole transition of time. Like, you could go ramp all the way up real quick, do like a fast burn and then like a slow cool, and that'll change the way that the materials that you've got in this kiln, it'll change the way that they form. But there's like, it's a concept called heat work that says how much heat do you apply and for how long do you apply it. Well, that's how you get an idea of this concept of firing. So if you fire it to cone 7 or you fire it to cone, what is it, 6 or 5, I think porcelain might even be closer to cone 2. Nope, I think that's backwards. I think the higher the cone.
I don't think anyone's fact checking you.
Anyway, it's a heat work concept. So like, as long as you've reached a temperature and time ratio, it's met that requirement. And so for certain ceramic materials, like, you need a specific amount of heat work in order for that to set. Then to get some of the glazes that, all of these things that people are looking at like, oh my God, it's so beautiful, or it looks iridescent, or oh, how did you get like all these crystallization forms? And so in order to achieve some of those, you have to have a specific cool down period. And so what a lot of people do is they try to adjust the cool down period. So like, as soon as I make it up to 2,400 degrees, I want it to stay that way for 5 minutes. And then I want to cool down. So shut the electronics off. I want it to cool down until it gets to this temperature, and I want to hold it. And I want to hold it for 30 minutes. And then from there, I want to cool down, and I want to get to this temperature, and I want to hold it for 5 minutes. And then, like, so automating that whole process. There are kilns, Scut Kilns has those systems built in, but it's very, like, you have to set your steps, and, like, it's very limited in what you can do. I have a manual kiln. The manual kiln basically says you put your cone in here. You've got these, it's 3 prongs. You put your cone in here it's this way. As soon as that cone melts and this prong on top drops, that's what shuts your kiln off. That's what starts the cool down period. If I can get the electronics, so my thermocouples, all like to tell me the temperature, if I can get that hooked up to the internet, I can use a Power App and Power Automate to set my firing schedules. And I can say, okay, well, I need you to go up to 200, because up to 200 degrees, like, that's where your water's going to evaporate. And then from 200 degrees to 2,400 degrees, I can say, I need you to go, and I need you to go fast. But to get to 200, if you don't go slow enough, your pottery will explode, because the air that's trapped within water, when you break it all down into its chemical elements, is oxygen. And that oxygen is like, nope, I'm not going to stay here. I want to go. And so it's just like, so you have to have a slow ramp up to 200 so that all of the water can evaporate, and then you can just rock it straight up. So there's also a whole, whatever. Anyway, power on you. Electronics.
I love it. It's all good. Electronics, yeah.
Yeah, so
Ceramics,
I want to learn how I can start to incorporate what I'm doing in, on the computer, in code, in, automating and whatnot, and how I can use that to then get information that is coming out of a thermocouple and maybe just dropping it into a database, and that data, like, all of that data is being collected. And so as soon as this happens, that's when the next thing needs to happen. And so I want to get to that point where I understand it. But to do that, I have to understand how to get the real life into, code world, into the computer automatically.
Yeah. Oh, there's some problems to solve.
Yeah, where I don't have to be the one to enter the information. The information can be gathered from the various tools that we have. So that's my latest and greatest thing, just because they had like a 70% off sale for their community members a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, let me look at it. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I can get an Arduino board that's got Bluetooth and Wi-Fi incorporated? Hello, that's what I need. I need that Wi-Fi talk so that, like, I can gather the information. Because right now, how am I going to get my thermocouple information into a data system when they're not connected? If I've got the thermocouple connected to an Arduino board that's collecting all this information and it's sending it via Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, then it gets into my data system. So, that's my latest and greatest brain scratch.
That is so fun. I'll say my ceramics claim to fame is in high school. I took my ceramics electives 1 and 2 for my art classes for my high school diploma. Proud ceramics dude. But no, that's awesome. I mean, Kat, this has been awesome connecting with you and talking to you. I will say you are proudly likely the longest episode of the series so far, which is okay. It's okay. Yeah, it's
I'll take
trophy to you. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's been a joy talking to you and just picking your brain and your expertise.
Well, I appreciate it. Are you going to be at Power Platform Conference?
I am not. I know. Okay. I'm a bum. I'm a loser. But yeah, as the time of recording, that is in a couple weeks. This might go up that same week. I'm not sure the exact scheduling, but right around that time, this episode will go up. So,
all right.
I wanted to say as well, if people heard this conversation, this is the first time they've heard of Cat Schneider and wanted to connect with you, what would be the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn and Twitter. You're a wizard, Cat. I've also got a blog out there, you'rewizardcat.com, where I'm trying, I haven't been great about keeping up with my blog because, ADHD, flavor of the week, what's gonna, get you out there. I have ideas in my head.
Okay.
What my blog is supposed to be or what I want it to be. I'm just trying to find the time between work and, my newfound hobby to do all of that. But, the way I look at it is Twitter is for shenanigans. LinkedIn is for more professional shenanigans. So
I'll be sure to link both of those in the description down below.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to connect with you. Again, thanks for being here. This has been awesome. Thank you to you for sticking to end the video. My name is Griffin Lickfeld, the host of the Citizen Developer channel, and I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.